Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for coming to this event, which is on being LGBT plus in the fast stream, but also the civil service more generally. My name's Adam, and I'm one of the fast stream outreach team for Glasgow, and I'll be sort of hosting the session and marshalling it along as we go. The goal of the session really is to answer any questions, address any concerns you might have, and maybe just kind of give you a bit of a sense of what it's like being LGBT plus in the civil service more generally as a fast streamer. And I think the ultimate goal is really to encourage you to seriously consider a career in the civil service. And the core message is that we'd be delighted to have you. So a little bit of sort of housekeeping before we crack on. The structure of this, it's a panel Q&A discussion. But we'll start off just with a little bit of a monologue from our two speakers, and then we'll delve into your questions after that once they've finished. So please do, as we go along. I don't know how many of you have used this before, but please, it's a Zoom webinar, which means we can't see you, but you can see us. So please do use the Q&A function and the chat function. Pop your questions as we go, as our speakers are speaking. Feel free to pop questions in there, and I'll marshal them and ask them on your behalf once they're finished speaking. It's being recorded as well, so just do be aware of that. You know, don't post anything in the Q&A that you wouldn't want any of the students at Glasgow to see when they're watching this recording back. So just do be aware of that. Now on to our speakers. I won't spoiler them too much. I'll let them talk about their own experiences, but we have Nicola Smith with us, who is a senior civil servant at the, I never get this right, Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office. Is that right, Nicola? And also a former fast streamer, so has some really interesting perspectives. And obviously Nicola's very busy, so we're very thankful for Nicola for giving up her time today. And then we also have Liz Maxted, who is a current fast streamer and is a member of the Fast Streams LGBT plus network. And it also happens to be her birthday as well. So we'd like to thank her for giving up her time on her birthday. It's very kind, very generous of her. So I think that is all the sort of nuts and bolts down. Nicola, are you happy to go first and tell us a little bit about your experiences?
Sure. Thanks, Adam. So as Adam mentioned, I joined on the generalist fast stream scheme. In 2007, I'd had a bit of a mixed career up until that point. I studied psychology at Edinburgh University. Then I spent 2 years living in Japan. I came back to Scotland, not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. And then decided to move to London, partly because I knew I was gay at that point. And for me, I wanted to move to a big city. When you do in your 20s, had an amazing time in my 20s in London. And at that point, decided to join the fast stream. So joined the civil service. And at the time, I wasn't allowed to pick which department I worked in. So they put me in tax. So it was a bit of a mixture going into a tax department when I had sort of been working overseas at that point, doing a lot of international stuff, including volunteering abroad. So I spent, in usual fast stream, they sort of throw you in the deep end. So I spent my first year working on a big change programme. My second year doing operational management of tax evasion officers. My third year going into the Cabinet Office, and at the time it was Gordon Brown as Prime Minister, so briefing Gordon Brown. And then it was David Cameron and the coalition government. And then back to HMRC, working on national minimum wage, which was really interesting. And then I was really fortunate to join the Olympics in 2012. So I covered a range of different venues outside of London, including football at Hampden, which was great fun. And then after the Olympics, the thing about the Olympics, it's got a very clear end date. I had to find another role in the civil service. And for me, I wanted to get back into the international space. So I ended up joining a unit called Government Partnerships International, which was part of the Department for International Development. Well, it was actually a cross-cutting unit between the Foreign Office and Department for International Development, and spent the next sort of almost like 9 years coming up to in the international space, working on international development. Now that was very interesting, and given that this is about LGBT+, I was working in some countries where the laws weren't that friendly to openly gay people. So it was a bit of a, at times it made for quite interesting discussions, but throughout my whole time in the career, I've been very actually quite happy to be out. Including I regularly talk about my wife. I'm in a same-sex marriage, and I think everyone recognises that I talk about my wife and my dog as much as anything else, so it's very much treated like anyone else, I would say. Been absolutely active in various LGBT+ networks, including the one in the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. Try not to use acronyms. So that's a bit of a background in my career, and I also mentor LGBT+ other civil servants who are in the early days of their career, because I recognise that I'm probably quite confident in who I am in my own identity, but I recognise that's going to vary for every individual. That's it from me, Adam.
Thanks very much, Nicola. And if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask Nicola specifically, do pop them in the Q&A function now, and we'll get to them after our next speaker has finished. So our next speaker is Liz. Hi, Liz. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your experiences, please?
Absolutely. I don't have nearly the the breadth of experience that Nicola has, but glad to share what I do have. So I'm currently the bi champion for the LGBT+ network in the far stream. I've been out as bi since I've been a teenager. It was fairly difficult for me as a teenager because I was in a all-girls school, so being anyway gay isn't liked when you're in your it may not might change now, but that was my experience in the school. When I went to university, I went to Leeds because I wanted to get as far away from my school as possible. Again, I found some difficulty fitting in as LGBT. I found when I had male partners, I wasn't allowed to be in the LGBT groups because I wasn't gay enough. And then if I had a same-sex partner, I was told, well, just call yourself a lesbian and take one for the team, be more gay. So I didn't really fit in at uni as being gay. Again, things probably changed now, but that was my experience personally. It wasn't until I came to DWP, which is where I was before the far stream, that I felt actually I was quite accepted for being bi, even if I was in a opposite sex relationship, a straight relationship. In DWP, they were very, very accepting and allowing, accommodating. It wasn't just me, myself, there was another gay member of our team. We were both not even just accepted to go to events, but encouraged to go to LGBT network events and spend time out of our day doing that for our own personal development, not even as part of the role. As well as LGBT stuff in DWP, I was heavily supported in contributing to the Women's Network, which I was very involved with. And in the far stream, as I said, I'm the bi champion. I was welcomed into the network as a bi person. So this is a little bit negative, not for the far stream, but for, I guess, my experience. My first posting that I'm just finishing, my initial AM wasn't a very nice person. He was quite racist, quite homophobic, and a bit of a bully. But as soon as I reported that, it was dealt with in the best way it could have been dealt with, honestly. So the far stream and the Cabinet Office, absolutely 2 thumbs up from me there in terms of how they supported me in my complaint. And my TDM, who is my manager on the far stream side in the Cabinet Office, again, extremely supportive for when I need to do things for the network. If I need to take time out to do an event or to attend a meeting, very supportive. I'm allowed to take all the time that I need for that because it's supporting my development as a person as well as helping the civil service by encouraging LGBT awareness. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. That's great, really helpful. Any questions for either of our panelists, please do pop them in the Q&A. In true TV presenter style, I do have a couple that I would, if no one's got any, I've got some that I think would be really helpful to explore a bit further. So Nicola, first of all, you spoke about different cultural attitudes to LGBT people, to gay people. How did the civil service and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office kind of support you when you were going into those situations? How did it all work, and did you feel supported?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one colleague's very, very supportive, and I think in certain situations, for me, my safety was paramount. And I've worked in conflict settings, so I've had close protection and things like that, in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on. But it was mainly in countries where I'd been visiting quite a long time, like in sub-Saharan Africa, and I knew. Look, I'm in a very privileged position of being able to go to countries and spend time working and getting to know local people in the different cultural. And for me, it was very much about going with an open mind and a curiosity. And I think, look, there are certain cultures that are very quite private anyway, others less so, maybe a bit more inquisitive about your personal life. But for me, I was there in a professional capacity, so I think I was always very much around keeping those professional boundaries. I was not in the country to go and talk about our own legislation around the Equality Act and so on, and how we support LGBT plus. But in terms of the FCDO, the Foreign Office, there's a very active LGBT plus network, and I should point out, I think it was one of the questions, each big department has its own LGBT plus network, but there's also a central cross civil service network that supports and coordinates across the whole of government. So there's a range of different things, and that's recognising, look, the civil service is huge. I think it's over 350,000, 400,000. I think Liz and Adam will be able to correct me on the numbers. So some government departments are based all over the UK, obviously some overseas, like where I work, and each have got their own little local areas if there's big enough groups. So, for example, in the area, the Foreign Office in which I work, my own directorate's got its active diversity and inclusion working group, and does a lot around, LGBT plus History Month and so on. So that's in response to what I think your question, Adam.
Thanks, Nicola. Very helpful. And we've had a couple of questions about networks now. I wonder, is it worth Liz and just talking a little bit about the Fast Stream LGBT network specifically, and what it does, how it works, what activities it carries out, and that sort of thing. And then Nicola, if you've got anything to add on your networks, that would be great.
So I've answered the question in text, but I will speak it as well. So each department has LGBT groups or networks that you can be a part of if you're in that department. The Fast Stream itself also has an LGBT plus network that fast streamers can be a part of. And what we do, we're just a community to offer support, to LGBT plus people in their postings if they're having difficulty, make sure that, you feel safe in your placement. But also it's fun, we get together, we have quizzes and drink nights and all sorts of events. We have a book club. We've just started a book club. I'm in the next few weeks, I'm going to be starting a D&D club in the LGBT group, LGBT D&D.
Is that Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah,
for those
Dungeons and Dragons.
Acronym, right? Okay.
We're also quite nerdy, but if you're not nerdy, that's fine. There's non-nerdy things that you can do and still be LGBT. It's I just say it's great. Can I also answer this other question? Sorry.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Sorry.
But just about the hostility towards transgender people, can I answer that, or do you want me to wait for a bit? Okay.
Please go for it, Liz. Please
Obviously, I can't attest and say that you would never ever face hostility, because, as I've mentioned, my manager was not a very nice person. But what I can say is that the civil service is committed to making sure that you are in a safe environment. And if somebody was hostile towards you and discriminated against you because you're transgender, absolutely take it seriously if you put a complaint in. And I just hope that people wouldn't be. I know a lot of people, a lot of transgender people and non-binary people in the fast stream and in the civil service that it's just normal. It's, we haven't, in my experience, haven't faced any kind of discrimination. But I'm not transgender, so I can't say anything from personal experience. I hope that's okay.
There is that's great. There is a civil service gender network as well called Agender, who do some really good work around promoting awareness of different gender identities and transgender people. And they actually, if you're successful in applying to the fast stream, you attend an introductory event called Base Camp. And at the Base Camp I attended, there was actually a talk from Agender about gender diversity. So it's something that the fast stream certainly does take very seriously. Nicola, we got
on the back of that. So I often chair recruitment panels. So there's a variety of different things that we try to do to ensure that it's objective based on merit, which is the law, and it's open, fair competition. So I think often what I will do is I will meet with the other panel members. And one, we've got name blind recruitment, so to try and take out we're not allowed to put any education background or name individuals, to try and take that out. Then during the panel, we will actively discuss and debrief, and occasionally I've brought in HR members. I've made sure I've got as diverse panel as possible, whether that's someone from I'm quite fortunate to work in a very diverse directorate, so ensuring a real cross-representation. Personally, I've never had that without making assumptions about the people I've interviewed, but I don't think it's ever factor, but I can't say that that's the case, because obviously I don't see the whole recruitment across civil service, but I think we have been working very hard to try and eradicate unconscious bias at the recruitment stage. On the networks, I think someone asked me specifically, have the networks supported my career? I'll be honest, no. I think my career has probably benefited most from having mentors that have got nothing to do with my sexuality, actually. It's more people that have looked out for me, championed my career. Often men, weirdly. Maybe that's because I'm slightly masculine presenting, need a lockdown haircut, even though I've been using the dog clippers. So I don't know if it's, I wouldn't say that the networks for me are more just a safe space. So I've used it mostly for social events, the LGBT plus one. I recall back to when I was fast stream, exact same, when I've been in departments joining the network. And I know my peers in those networks, particularly because I work in the international space, they use it as a source of information for spouses and partners if they're going abroad and so on, because that can be an issue if you're in the same-sex relationship for visas and so on, and protection and diplomatic status. So I know that our network and the Crown Foreign Commonwealth Development Office are active in that space. But for me, it's mainly social. I quite like the book club. I'm also active outside of work with a big East London lesbian meetup group. And I know the chair of that, which is also very good fun. So there's different ways that I'm sort of active. I also ride a motorbike, so I'm a member of Dykes on Bikes, and was very happy when I got invited to ride at the start of Pride, and I can't actually make it because I'm going to be on holiday in Scotland. So Scotland trumps the Dykes on Bikes, what can I say?
Thank you both. One thing that struck me actually while you're both speaking is that in the fast stream and in the civil service generally, you do meet a lot of different people and you change roles potentially a lot. And I guess potentially that involves coming out quite a few times in quite a few different settings to different people. I wonder if you've had any experience of that. How's that been? Has it been an issue? How have you managed to, I guess you have to steel yourself and build up the confidence as well. And how have you approached that? Have you got any tips or anything like that on that?
I can go first. I would say it's
Great,
if you don't want to come out, you don't have to. You know, if you want to keep your sexual identity or your gender identity private at work, that's fine. You know, sometimes you do that for your safety, and you come out when you want to come out. You don't have to. All I'd say is I've met, as you just said, Adam, so many different people in my time in the civil service. So before the fast stream, I was in DWP for 3 years. And my first placement because I'm a first year fast streamer, just finishing my first placement in the digital stream. I was in test and trace for 6 months. Again, met a whole load of different people. Wasn't really out in test and trace apart from to my manager, who was not very nice. But again, that was dealt with. You know, my fast stream manager, I'm out to her. She's great about it. My new posting that I'm starting in a week, I'm out with them already because they just seemed a lot more welcoming and supportive. So it's your choice if you want to come out or be out. And then I guess as well, another thing, just don't make it, if you don't want it to be a big deal, just don't be a big deal. You know, I often say my partner instead of my boyfriend or I suppose fiance is kind of gender neutral anyway, but you know, I normally try and keep a gender neutral kind of term for him because at the end of the day, I am bi, and also it makes people feel better who have same-sex relationships and want to say partner. I always put pronouns in my signature at work to be supportive of any trans or non-binary people that want to put their pronouns in their signature. I feel like this is a culture that's changing a lot to be that way in the civil service increasingly.
Very much so. Thanks, Liz. Nicola, would you like to add anything on that?
It's interesting because my colleague once wrote a blog about this, and I've and it resonated about this sort of the daily coming out, and absolutely agree with Liz. It's up to you if you want to or not. I think for me, because I present as quite like, even if people stereotype, make assumptions, I look quite like a soft butch lesbian. What can I say? Like, I wear men's clothes because they've got better pockets. Like you can climb trees in them. What can I say? That's my standards. So I think people probably assume, you know, that I'm gay, and so it's pretty easy. It does mean, like, outside of work, I'm quite acutely aware of my own safety, though, because I present that way, and that has, like, and living in London, it's quite, even though weirdly I moved here for the big city, I've been subject to hate crimes in London, you know, and reported them, and that's just rubbish, really. At work, it has occasionally led to quite embarrassing, but not like malicious. Like a colleague once shouted across the office going, "Oh, Nicola, do you know about this LGBT protest in X country?" And sort of outed me to colleagues, and like, bless him, like that was him trying to be inclusive, but maybe in a slightly misdirected way. And I was able to pick that up with him and say, by the way, you've just outed me to some junior members of staff who I hadn't actually discussed. So that was like, absolutely recognises that wasn't right, you know. So It is, and also remember when I've worked abroad and people have made assumptions, they normally assume I'm straight because the countries I'm with. At times I haven't corrected them. It's just not worth it. Because there I'm maybe only meeting this individual once or twice in a couple of weeks when I'm overseas, and that's not what I'm there to do, you know. And that goes back to, that's my professional boundaries I draw. Whereas I know colleagues who are openly out ambassadors on social media talking about their same-sex partners, and that's absolutely great. That's great. And whereas I also know people who are in the completely married but absolutely don't broadcast it at all and keep a very, very low profile. So again, it's an individual choice, and I think it's about thresholds and what you're comfortable with.
Thank you, Nicola. We've got a question here, Liz, based on what you said about not feeling gay enough, and about whether, yeah, great, thank you. Yes, if you could answer that, that'd be great.
So when I said that, I was referring to when I was in university, and I think with hindsight, you know, people are 18 years old, and I think when you're a bit less mature, some people, I'm not talking about obviously you guys are in university, but I don't know. Also, this is about 10 years ago, so times have changed. People are quite, I guess, possessive of the identity of being gay, and you're not, why do you want to come and be in our group of gay people when you've got a boyfriend? And I was like, well, I like women too, you know. But the question that you're asking is more, can you be too gay for the civil service? No. Again, what the civil service can't do is vet every single person that comes through their doors to make sure that they're not homophobe, you know. And you might come across somebody in the workplace that's homophobic. That's going to be the case everywhere you work. But that's not a problem for the civil service. It's not like the civil service is going to boot you out because you're too gay. I have worked with people that are, you know, men that are very, very camp, and there's been some of the best people I've ever worked with, and people love them. Not because they're very camp, just because they're great at what they do. Back in DWP, I was very heavily involved with the Women's Network, and one of the lasses there, a very, very out and proud lesbian, again, very successful in the civil service. She wins awards like every year for her work in the Women's Network space, or the Women's Achievement space. I don't really know what the term is. So I don't think you can be too gay. I think if you come across the wrong person, as with anywhere else in the world, you might be too gay and they might give you a problem. The response to that is process, complaining and reporting, because the only way we can eliminate that culture in the civil service is by eliminating that culture in the civil service. And we don't want people like that working with us.
Great, thank you, Liz. Nicola, have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
I think let's hit it on the nail. I think what the civil service, it's not a homogenous beast. There are there's a lot of different cultures in different departments. I could slightly jokingly refer to, the really young, ambitious departments that work very closely in the Treasury type thing, or the big operation departments like Department for Work and Pension, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, tax, or the Foreign Office, as I've been saying, which is a little bit out there because it's all sort of overseas. So you're going to, each has a different one. There's Ministry of Defence as well, which is also another interesting one. So what you tend to find is you end up, when you start your career, in particular on the fast stream, where you move government departments a lot, and I've worked in lots of different government departments, you start orientating to the ones that suit you. And so I think each of them, and everyone I've worked in, it's different in terms of how open you feel, how you can be yourself a little bit, and that's what it's slightly trial and error sometimes. And you'll find little pockets within all of them that I genuinely feel that I can be absolutely authentic at work, who I am, and very open, and I recognise that's great. That's kind of employer you want, that you can bring your whole self to work. And I absolutely, look, I'm not going to say the civil service is perfect, and I'm doing an event later about coming from a lower socioeconomic background, and I do think there is a little bit something about the civil service and class that actually I'll talk about. So when you've got the intersectionality of lower class, less so for me being a gay woman, because weirdly that kind of suits my career. But when I can imagine if you came from like a minority background and maybe Windsor and Start intersection, it could be a bit trickier. And I think we're working really hard to become one of the most diverse employers. So, and it's partly the reason that, look, we want to make sure we've got like the pipeline from all graduates, including the fast stream, because ultimately as a civil service, you know, supporting the government of the day, we've got to represent the population. We have to. That's how you make the best policy advice. So, and I think that's, for us, we know we've got a job to do in terms of particular groups to actually make it more diverse and inclusive, including people from an LGBT plus background.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nicola. And if anyone would like to come to that event on being from a lower socioeconomic background, that's on at 4 o'clock. So we'd be delighted to have you join us there. If anyone's got any final questions, if they just want to pop them in the Q&A, and we've got a few minutes left. And in the meantime, I have one final question for Nicola, if that's okay. And I was just wondering, Nicola, if you have noticed much change in attitudes towards LGBT people in the last, 15 years or so, since you've joined the civil service, whether it's improved?
Yeah, I would say so. I think, but it's hard for me to distinguish it between whether it's my confidence increasing, because I am quite well established. I'm quite an experienced senior civil servant now, which is again quite a very privileged position to be in. So even if people were wanting to say something, they'd be a bit daft saying it to my face, because like I've got that positional authority. But when I was earlier on, I did notice it. Like, the only way I could describe it is this, like, and I've been in civil service, as I said, almost coming up to 15 years. Early on, I'd probably be a lot more hesitant about that sort of coming out. And not necessarily like being open or really choosing who I would talk about my private life to. Whereas now I just don't give a monkeys. Like I was like, it's who I am. You have to get with it and hear everything about what my wife's up to, so that's basically, and I recognize that might come with a little bit of where I am. And the other thing about the civil service can be occasionally hierarchical. So I'm probably talking from a place of being slightly up that hierarchy. But I think I'd like to think for people coming new into it, actually they're very comfortable. So probably Liz is in a better place to, even though it was rubbish, you had that experience of your line manager. To be honest, that's like, yeah, that's rubbish. I'd hope that there's better managers out there, because my experience, bar one, I've had great managers over my whole sort of career. And that individual wasn't having a go at me because I was gay. They were having a go at me because I was a woman, weirdly, and it was coming from a woman. So it's weird how you get different dynamics, but I think that happens everywhere.
Absolutely.
Can I
Thanks,
just to clarify, my
Mhm.
the manager that bullied me actually wasn't a civil servant; he was a contractor, and he was dismissed quite quickly after I showed evidence of him bullying me, quite horrifically.
Well, we've got a last minute question for you here, Liz. How have you found navigating networking online in your first year? Joining the networks and feeling part of them and that sort of thing, given that it's all been online, how's that been?
So it's an experience. I'm quite a hermit anyway. I like online gaming and things like that. So I'm quite an online person to begin with. In terms of networking, at work it's difficult. Not difficult, but it's harder. As I said, I worked with EWP before I came to the fast stream. So from March, when we started working from home, to October, I was working from home in DWP. And then I just got a laptop turn up in the post one day, and suddenly I'm working from home for test and trace. And I've never met anybody that I've worked with. And now I'm leaving. So 6 months, I've never met any of these people. It has its own challenges. Obviously, there's good bits. Working from home, I like it. I have a dog. It helps her out. I can go take her for a walk at lunchtime. It's great. But on the negative side, I feel like there's a special kind of anxiety that you get from working at home. In terms of, if you walk away from your computer and you see the little Skype logo go from available to away, you think people are going to think I'm not doing work. You just want a cup of tea. I think people get it, but I think there's a different kind of stress that comes from working from home compared to an office where sometimes you just flip your chair around and speak to your co-worker that sits behind you for 10 minutes when you've got a bit of a slow time. That was my experience at DWP anyway. We all love tea and biscuits there. In terms of networking, I don't have anything to compare it to because I never got to experience the network in person. But I hear they did a lot of drinking in person, which I've not had that experience. But alternatively, what you have to consider is the fast stream isn't just London based, you're based nationally. So what it has opened up is more opportunity for everyone to get involved in network events and not just those people that happen to be placed in a placement in London, which I'm not because I'm in Leeds. So I'd have missed out potentially on a lot of socialising had it not been for the pandemic, which is a weird thing to think about. So in a very roundabout way, that's how I found networking during the pandemic.
Great, thanks. That's really interesting, really good point. Unless there are any final, we've got one sneaked in. I'm an EU national, and the civil service at home has a bit of a dusty image. Is this an international stereotype, and was that a deterrent for you when you thought about applying? That's a good question. Anyone like to take the lead answering that?
What do you mean by dusty image?
So I'm assuming just a bit old-fashioned, quite traditional. That's my interpretation of dusty. So you can tell I work with governments around the world, including I've worked with a lot of EU colleagues as well. So there's actually an International Civil Service Effectiveness Index. It looks at all the OECD countries, and actually the UK's, I think for the first time it came top actually. And the year before, the last time it was on, it was Canada. So I think I'm not going to say we're brilliant at everything, because if you look at that index, actually, it shows you the areas where we're benchmarked against other countries. There are certain areas we're seen as performing very well, whereas other areas less so. And the graduate fast stream, and I'm sure Liz and Adam it's the top graduate employer. I think in terms of the responsibility you get, like in my third year in the fast stream, I was basically briefing prime ministers, on very hot topics and aftermath of the global financial crisis. That was my third year as a graduate. So it was huge. I got to work on the Olympics. The diversity of career opportunities are just incredible. I've traveled to 19 countries with a foreign office. So And I was briefing like last week, the week before, the foreign secretary. So there's just, it depends what you want. Like you've got, if you talk about we're not workaholics, I've never worked so hard in my whole life last year than I have during the pandemic. Like we had to go into crisis leadership, you know, yeah, there are areas where you can do that. It depends what you're after, really. So, and again, it goes back to it's not a homogenous blob. I think there's a huge diversity depending on what you're after. And the graduate fast stream, I think it targets people who want that accelerated career. So the opportunities you get, if you look at the number of absolute top civil servants, and particularly the top in each government department, I guarantee a lot of them would have come up through the fast stream because it's trying to recruit for that sort of accelerated career. So I would definitely not call it dusty. I definitely could not call the fast stream dusty. I'd say it's very much chucked into the deep end and sink or swim. Even Adam, you're on stage at the moment, are you not? Like...
Yes. Last week I briefed. Actually, this week I briefed the chief scientific advisor before his number 10 press conference yesterday afternoon. So it's very much not sort of dull and dusty. It's very exciting, high-paced, frenetic, and I've met some really interesting and, you know, bohemian people that, you know, it's not all old men in suits. Liz, anything you'd like to add on that?
My next placement, so I've just come from Test and Trace. Next week I start my new placement in the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, doing technology innovation consultancy. And today, and I thought this was a birthday present that arrived in the post for me, but it wasn't. I arrived this bit of kit that's going to be used in my new placement. That's the wrong way around. An Oculus. So I don't think it's very dusty at all, considering they've sent me an Oculus Quest to use for my job, because apparently we go into VR meetings and just hang out in virtual reality. I think
that is cool. Sorry, that's
so cool. Like sod test and trace, that's boring. Again, it's, as Nicola said a couple of times, it's, you know, it's not just one beast. There are going to be some corners of the civil service that are boring. You know, I came into DWP doing tech support, and I walked into an office and it was 5 men and they were all over the age of 40, and it was me, and I was the only woman, and I was 21 years old, and I thought, oh no. But they were great, like all them lovely guys. And then, you know, I've done different jobs, but as Adam said, that, you know, the big draw, I don't know, sorry, my Nicola that said it, but one of the big draws is, and this is a really horrible thing to say, it's money. You know, I came into the civil service on a really big pay jump from where I was working before, and I was on an EO level, and after working there for 3 years I got in the fast stream, and I know that in 3 years time I'm going to be earning like double what I was earning in my previous job at DWP, like between 40 and 50,000 pounds, which is just kind of mad for what I consider that I could earn. I didn't really explain my background properly before. I went to university, I didn't graduate. I got a bit bored of uni in my second year, and then I went and took a job in John Lewis doing tech support. Then from John Lewis I went and worked in a school doing tech support, and then I got contacted on LinkedIn by somebody in DWP saying, you look like you have some experience for this job that we've got in DWP. Do you want to interview? Like, do you want to try and apply for it? And I was like, yeah, go on then. Didn't think I'd get it, and got it. And you know, so for someone like me that doesn't have a degree, like the thought of earning 50 grand by the time I'm 28 is quite mad. But
I also used to work at John Lewis. Maybe there's something in the water in the staff canteen there. Yeah, I don't know whether Nicola did as well. That's like,
no,
there's something in that. Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, both of you. And I'm just quickly going to share my screen, which will include 2 things, really. Well, actually 3. The first of which is some information. I'm hoping you can see that. The first of which is some information that you can find out more about the fast stream, and you can sign up to get sort of a nudge via email when applications for the fast stream and the various internships reopen in the autumn. Any questions we didn't get a chance to answer today because we are out of time, unfortunately, you can email us there. If you email scotlandoutreach@gmail.com, that will reach us and we will be happy to answer your question. And finally, if you could, there is a QR code. Speaking of how we're not dusty and we're very exciting and technologically savvy, there's a QR code on there with a survey just for how useful the session was and what you've gotten out of it. It only takes a minute or two. So if you could just fill that in, we would really appreciate it so we can improve our future events and our outreach. So I think all that's left to do is say thank you very much to our panelists, to Nicola and Liz. I think I speak for everyone when I say your contributions have been really insightful and illuminating and really useful, I hope, to everyone on the call. And thank you as well to everyone who's listened in and asked questions. Your engagement's been great. And please do consider a career in the civil service and apply for the fast stream. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.